Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and today we have another build coming to you hot off the presses. I apologize if this might be a little bit later than our normal starting time. I'm still recovering from my vacation apparently, and it's been really rough. Also, I was playtesting earlier today or yesterday, and it was exhausting, but we did get a lot of progress done on the new game, so that's exciting as well. But today's build is going to be another interesting one. I was not expecting to do another magic caster kind of right in a row, but this build just kind of came to me and it was really, really fun to build, so I hope you all enjoy it. And if you do, hit the like button. If you want to see more videos like this, you can subscribe. And if you want to see, everything that we're doing and participate, we are currently running a community spotlight for community builds that is going to be coming up. We have 2 weeks. The last day you can turn in your community build is on the 15th of September. So join our Discord linked in the description where you can put your community build that may show up in our spotlight video where Alex and I take a look at our 5 favorite builds together. Other than that, you can follow me on Twitter if you want something a little less committal than Discord. But with that, today we're going to be talking about a wizard class build, and one that has been very, very prominently shown, especially after the release of Book of the Dead. That's right, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the true Necromancy build. The true Necromancy build is a build of beating your enemies by sheer number. There is just I feel like there's a special quality to playing a build style that's completely based about hoarding enemies with your summons. Even if your summons are not particularly that strong, the sheer quantity of them will make them a nuisance for you to get around. And honestly, you still get to be a wizard on top of that, meaning that when all is said and done, you can still throw your fireballs if you need to, and who cares if it hits your undead minions, because there are always more. This is also a really interesting build because I wanted to make a design that felt very focused on the aspect of summoning undead creatures or utilizing undead creatures in the build. And I think I got a really good mix, but I am sure I'm going to be inundated with hundreds of builds of what people think their necromancy build could be better. So, I'm just going to toss mine into the pile and see if y'all like it, and I hope you do. But the true necromancy build is very, I guess, fairly worded, mostly because it is purely about the art of resurrecting bodies and swarming enemies with hordes of undead. That is, I think, what everyone likes to think the Necromancer is about, and this build is really good at doing that. So let's go ahead and look at some of the attributes. So attributes starting out, intelligence is going to be your primary attribute. As a wizard, it's going to be really important. It's not going to be super important for your actual summons, though. So if you wanted to have a slightly less high intelligence, like starting at a 16 maybe, you could probably do so. But one of the big parts of this build is definitely just throwing out your undead to get in the way of the enemies so that you can cast spells at them in relative peace. So that being said, you probably want a really good intelligence. The second attribute actually beats the normal trend, and it has wisdom as our secondary attribute focused. And that's predominantly for the reason that when you have a high initiative, it makes it easier for you to set up your turn. And especially considering we're going to be using the Animate Dead spell, which is a summoning spell that has 3 actions. Well, I mean, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? It's a spell that is very much going to take up all your actions, so you want to get it out as soon as you can so you can protect yourself or at least set out enemies that can stop, or set out minions to stop enemies from getting up to you. And so, yeah, wisdom is actually going to be a really good one. And again, as I kind of mentioned with the sorcerer build, I'm also going to recommend the general feat incredible initiative. It's really, really good. The higher your initiative, the higher your survivability is going to be. And the last attribute is going to be con. the more health the better, especially when you're a squishy wizard. You don't want your con to be any lower than like a 14, honestly. But, you know, the point of the build is not to get hit. So it's not as important. You might take another attribute like charisma, for instance. But I definitely recommend con as our third attribute, and charisma can be the fourth if that's what you so choose. But yeah, so it not rocket science. It's kind of your standard glass cannon wizard stat layout, but it is optimal for this build, and it works really well for what we're going to be doing. Also, I'm another thing about wisdom that I failed to mention. Religion is going to be one of the skills we're going to focus on, and having a high wisdom makes your wisdom based checks going to be better. And talking about skills, the two skills I'm going to recommend are going to be religion followed by occultism. So religion is obvious for recalling knowledge on undead creatures. This might be important for your endeavors. It's also really important for a ritual if you ever get access to it, which I think is like the Raise Dead. Actually, let me check. Yes, it is indeed, or it is Create Undead, which is not going to be a focus of this build, actually. This build is going to be a lot more self-sufficient. You don't need to necessarily rely on finding this ritual, investing your gold, or anything like that. Though, if your character does get access to it, it is going to be a big boon for saving up a reserve for your undead minions. That being the case, occultism also fits for a variety of reasons. One, it can also be used for the ritual, but two, it just has that thematic build that allows you to kind of have that kind of creepy cultist kind of aspect to the character. It's really good. Obviously, Arcana can work just as well and might be even more preferable, since I do believe actually you use Arcana for learning spells. Though I think wizards, don't they already get Arcana? Let me double check. They do start out with Arcana, and it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to boost your Arcana as you're leveling up as well. I chose Religion and Occultism because they felt like they fit thematically, but obviously Arcana is another really important stat as well, and probably a little bit more important than Occultism, so we'll just swap those two over there. Alright, so before we get into the wizard build itself, we're going to talk about what wizard features you pick out starting as a level 1 wizard, as obviously you get to pick a school and a magical thesis. Now, here's where it comes to be the true necromancy build, because we're actually going to pick the Conjuration school, which is really important because, one, you get a spell slot at every spell level you can cast for Conjuration spells, which is, you know, anything that summons, for instance, like Animate Dead. A very important slot, and you pretty much can dedicate Animate Dead to each of those slots. Not only that, but the focus spell you start off with, Augment Summon, is really good because it can essentially give your summons a level boost. Now, something that's going to come up a lot when people are talking about this build is summons are inferior as far as spell slot efficiency for defeating enemies. And what I mean by this is a spell you can, whatever undead you summon, they range from 2 to 5 levels underneath your current level while casting the spell. I think 4 realistically, but it's between 2 and 5 levels under your character level, meaning that they're honestly not going to be able to put up much of a fight against creatures that are like bosses, or even kind of mid-range boss creatures that are within a level of or 2 of you. But what makes this build good, and the reason why a summoning build is really solid, is one, you're going to just completely swarm whatever targets you have with dice rolls, and thus you have a higher chance of critting, doing some other kind of things. But not only that, but they create targets for the enemies to focus on. And unless you're fighting very intelligent enemies, dumber enemies are just going to attack whatever is attacking them back, pretty much. Making this really good for stalling out, and it creates a good buffer between you and the enemies. And not only that, but some undead, some of the summons actually do have some really good utility that you can use in a lot of situations. In fact, the undead list is so massive now that you can almost pull out an undead for every situation, that even though it might be a little underleveled, it still has a lot to offer in the situation. So just something to keep in mind. Regardless, this is the general gist of the build, is you're going to be summoning a lot of creatures and some other things as we're going. So Conjuration, you get augment summoning, which is really good. It essentially levels up your summons, increasing all DCs and checks, which includes AC by 1. It's essentially a free level up for them. It's really nice. It makes them feel a little better. Plus, it's a single action focus spell that lasts for a minute, which is about the same length of the summoning anyway. So you're just going to get a lot of utility out of this, and it's a single action. So, you can still command your creature, then augment them, and still have another action for whatever you want to do. As far as the magical thesis is concerned, I think any thesis really can fit, except for maybe improved familiar attunements or a spell substitution. Through this build, we're going to already have access to plenty of uses of the Animate Dead spell. So spell substitution isn't very useful, and a familiar isn't in this build either, and you're already going to be doing a lot of things anyway, so you don't need another action to command yet another creature. You could do so if you wanted to. I picked Metamagical Experimentation, mostly because, one, it gives you an additional feat at level 1. You get to pick a first level metamagic feat, pretty solid. Not only that, but starting at 4th level during your daily preparations, you can select a metamagic wizard feat of no greater than half your level as a metamagic you can use for the day. You can use this how you want. You're going to have other spells, obviously, other than Create Dead or Animate Dead. So I just felt that Metamagical Experimentation was pretty good. I think also Staff Nexus could work really, really well. I believe there are some spells that can heal undead in the list, and having a staff that has those automatically in it could be helpful, especially because healing a minion is not necessarily always a very good action to take. But hey, if you got the free slots for it, why not? Regardless, I really liked the Metamagical Experimentation. So, taking Metamagical Experimentation, our first level, we're picking up the Reach spell, as I just think it's more handy than the Widen spell at level 1. There might be other feats that come up later. Who knows at the time that you might be watching this video. Reach spell, I think, is just overall a little bit more useful. And if you ever get the ability to use Metamagics as a free action, for instance, you can use it to essentially push your summons even further out. Normally you can't do this because reach spell is a single action and summoning is 3 actions, so you normally can't do it. But you might be able to if some action economy gets shifted around for you. Alright, starting off at 2nd level, I'm going to throw y'all a curveball, and I'm going to recommend Undead Master as the first dedication that we're going to dip into. And this is predominantly for one reason. Your whole character aspect is that you're using undead to essentially fight for you or to get in the way. What better than an undead creature that is more powerful than most creatures that you're going to be able to summon anyway, and you don't even have to worry about the act of actually summoning them. You can just have it with you at all times. In fact, I recommend the Ghost for this reason. And predominantly because the Ghost is an easier minion to hide. If you're playing a neutral, good kind of style campaign, which most campaigns are, obviously walking around town with your undead is not necessarily kosher. But having a Ghost that is trained in stealth, which most undead minions actually don't get any skill proficiencies because they're mindless. So a Ghost that is trained in stealth and can fly can be a really good and easy way to keep your minion kind of out of sight, out of mind for most general situations. Though it can, the limited incorporeality that they have does cause some problems, but I think the Ghost is the more useful one. I think they're all pretty well balanced, and no matter what undead companion you pick, I think it would be a good one. This one is just for the sake of making it easier to go through town without having to worry about it. You might dress up your zombie. I don't know. Zombies are also really good to get a lot of health. But, you know, whatever, it's up to you. Regardless, the main factor is as you're leveling up, so is your companion. You're going to pick up feats to make your companion even stronger. And on top of that, this is just going to give you a reliable undead ally to fight for you that is going to be close to a character's level in strength. So I definitely recommend picking Undead Master as our first archetype dedication. At 4th level, we're going to pick up Mature Undead Companion. I think the feat's actually called Mature Beastmaster Companion, but they're undead minions. So I'm gonna refer to these feats as undead minions, even though I think the name of the actual feats are Beastmaster Companions. So yeah, so Mature one, obviously you're gonna bump up your creature's abilities, making them a little bit stronger and making for yourself a stronger ally. Not only that, but companions work really well with spellcasters, actually, especially because you can use an action to command your creature and then cast a spell as long as you don't need to necessarily move. And your companion is obviously going to run some interference for you. So I think overall it works really well for this build. At 6th level, I'm going to recommend Linked Focus, and predominantly that's for the cause of you're always going to be using Animate Dead for most fights to bring something onto the battlefield. I mean, you're a Necromancer after all, and what better than using your Arcane Bond class feature to bring back that spell that you've already used, so you can use your highest level Animate Dead again, and when you do it this way, you can get your focus point back once per day. But still, that's another augment summoning that we can use to make our undead a little bit stronger. All right, at 8th level, we're going to pick up Incredible Undead Companion. And that's going to be pretty much it for our Undead Companion as far as our feats are going to go. It pretty much serves its purposes. And the best part, and something I didn't really mention, but from Mature Undead Companion and on, if you can't command your Undead Companion for whatever reason, it'll use an extra action to stride or strike. If you had a mindless minion, it only can do the last action you commanded it to do, and it can't take any new actions by itself. One of the reasons why I mentioned the ghost specifically for selecting our animal companions or our undead companions is it can stride up and strike your foes as necessary, and this is really important because in tandem with using the Animate Dead spell, that's 3 actions, and your undead companion, or whatever you summon, would get 2 actions, and your undead companion actually still gets an action, essentially, so you don't lose any real action economy on your turn. And when you're sustaining the undead spell, you can cast a spell yourself, or you can reposition and command your undead companion to do whatever you need. This is really good because no matter what you're doing, whether you're slinging spells or whether you're commanding all your companions, you're always laying the pressure onto your foes with your horde of undead creatures. This is a really good way of cornering some enemies, as, I mean, I guess the ghost doesn't really block enemies from moving through it. I'm pretty sure. I think they can move through it because it's technically incorporeal. But if you pick something like the zombie, you can literally corner an enemy, making it difficult for them to actually move past your horde of undead. So Incredible Undead Companion is really, really good for this build. And then we're going to be moving on to something else for our next feat. Next up, you knew it was coming. It was the Reanimator Dedication, probably the best like undead necromancer dedication in the game. We're picking it up this late because I wanted to focus on getting a really solid undead companion that you can reliably use in combat and can consistently be with you for the rest of the game. Now we can start working on generating our undead horde. And the Reanimator Dedication is a pretty good one, and in fact, it does give a little bit of efficiency to our build up until this point. So what you can do is you can actually spend 10 minutes to swap one of your spells for the Animate Dead spell. which is really good if for some reason you've run out of those extra Animate Dead spell slots, obviously. So that potentially is really good. And on top of this, if you have a fresh corpse available, you essentially get the same benefit as the augment summon, just using a fresh corpse. So this is really good if a battle has been going on, you may have lost an undead minion, you can then animate one of the corpses on the battlefield, giving it that little bit of boost to its stats, making it that much more effective. It's a really solid build overall, and even when you don't have any corpses available, augment summon can still enhance whatever undead you create from the magic, from nothing, I guess. So overall, this is the beginning of where we start really focusing on our summoning aspect of the build. Next up for our level 12 feat is Bonds of Death. Again, another really keystone ability. Essentially what it is it a meta magic actually? It is not a meta magic. So as a free action, when you cast Animate Dead this turn, you automatically sustain your prior Animate Dead spell, and then you can spend an action to sustain both current Animate Dead spells. This is really important because this means that now you can have a horde of 3 undead creatures. And I'm sure in the future, if they don't have it already, I did check the list over, but I may have missed it. I can't wait for undead hordes, like a bunch of low-level zombies. They already have like battalions and such like this that use these rules. I can't wait for them to actually do this for like summoning purposes, like swarms of hands or whatever. In any regard, this is where we really start just buffeting our enemies with nothing but undead corpses. And it's really, really good. So now when you sustain your Animate Dead spells, you command 2 sets of undead with a single action, which is absolutely amazing. And then you can cast a spell, or you can command your undead companion to go out and start fighting for you as well. This is a very solid method of fighting a bunch of enemies, and this is just a good way to just horde against an enemies. Really set yourself up to just sit in the back line and cast spells as necessary. Alright, at 14th level, we're actually, I lied, we're not done with Undead Master yet. We're actually getting our specialized Undead Companion. It's just a really good feat to pick up. It makes your Undead Companion a little bit better. If you're using the Ghost, you can definitely really go super stealthy with it as well. It's something I highly recommend. This could be a free slot in the build if, honestly, you were really not into the Undead Companion itself. They're a little bit worse than normal companions for the sake of being undead, but I still think it's worth to invest it. Plus, again, these are your strongest minions. Your Undead Companion is your strongest minion, and it's something that you very much want to keep on hand and leveled up as much as possible. Alright, at 16th level, we're actually picking up Deathly Secrets. This is important for another feat we have later. Plus, you can get a really good focus spell, and that's another focus point, which is always good for this build as well, that can, aid you on your adventures. I personally recommend the, what was it called? Eyes of the Dead focus spell. I think it has a lot of utility, especially with your Undead Companion, which does count for the purpose of this particular build. If you have like the Undead Carrion Bird or whatever, I think it would be even better, since the Ghost is currently kind of tethered to you to 60 feet. But the Ghost could still do it in a lot of ways, plus it's very stealthy at this point as well. So I think that's probably one of the better ones. The other one is pretty good. Subjugate Undead is really good if you're running into a lot of undead foes as well, and it really gives you that superior Necromancer feel to it. I think either way, Deathly Secrets is a really good feat, and it's going to set us up for our next feat. For level 18, we're picking up Master of the Dead, so we can pick up the Shambling Horror focus spell. It's a very good focus spell. It wouldn't have been really good until the Undead, or the Book of the Dead, came out. So what this focus spell more or less does is you select a target. It's, I believe, 3 actions, right? Actually, let me pull it up. It's 3 actions. You target a corpse of a gargantuan or smaller creature that is no greater than your level -4 and has died since the last sunrise. And it has a duration of 10 minutes, which is more than most Animate Dead spells last. Granted, I don't think that's enough to necessarily go into multiple combats, because usually you get at least a 10-minute break between combats, but maybe not. This might be very, very handy. And the good thing is, it's just a focus point, and you can restore your focus points with the linked focus we mentioned earlier, allowing you to, if the battles keep coming, to keep using Shambling Horror. Now, what this more or less does is you target a corpse, and it must be a creature that has died since the last sunrise, so probably during this battle, and you reanimate the corpse of the fallen creature as an undead minion under your control. The reanimated corpse is an undead skeleton or zombie. You choose a skeleton or zombie stat block of the same size as the original creature and of a level no higher than the creature's original level. The Shambling Horror keeps its speed that it had in life, as well as the melee strikes that deal only physical damage. These attacks use the highest attack modifier from the skeleton or zombie you choose. These attacks use the highest attack modifier from the skeleton or zombie you choose. Some of the skeletons or zombies' abilities might not make sense for the Shambling Horror, and some abilities your creature had in life might not persist in undeath. GM's final choice. Weird. So is it the highest of the creature stat block or the skeleton or zombie stat block? That's what I feel like the intention is, unless it's saying you have to look for a skeleton and zombie of the appropriate size and level, and then you pick the highest attack between the two, regardless if it's a zombie or a skeleton, which I feel like would be a lot of work, but that's kind of how it's written. I don't know, that's very vague. Anyway, you can't have more than one Shambling Horror with this spell, and if you create a new one, the other one gets released. And if the spell ends, you can use Shambling Horror on a corpse only once more. However, after the next sunrise or the next time you attempt the spell on the corpse, it no longer takes effect. So this is a really good spell. And not only that, but an interesting thing about the Shambling Horror is that unlike Animate Dead, which requires you sustain it to keep the spell going, this does not have the sustain tag on it. So what that means is in a fight, you can summon a Shambling Horror, then you can animate an undead, and then you can animate another undead, or another corpse, I guess, using the spell again, and then you can use both of your summoned Animate Dead creatures with one action, your horror with another action, and your minion with a final action, making 4 minions to attack your target, one of which is near your level. And Shambling Horror is a conjuration spell, is a summoning spell, right? Oh no, it's not. That's very unfortunate. Darn, so you actually can't use Augment Summon on it, which is very unfortunate. But I guess technically, oh no, yeah, you also can't use the benefit from the Reanimator Dedication because that's only when you're casting Animate Dead. So unfortunately, you can't boost your horror, but it is using the highest strike of a creature of its stat block, which could be really, really good. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of ways this build can be done to make it very interesting. And I guess I should go ahead and finish off our final one. The level 20th feat is a free space. I actually really enjoy the idea of getting an additional undead companion from the Undead Master Archetype Dedication. It just gives you another option for another really strong undead. Plus, not only that, but it automatically gets all the other upgrades the other one does. So it starts off as a specialized companion using a specialization that you choose. I think it's a very solid choice. There's a lot of other really good choices. Reanimator has a lot of good feats in there as well. Whatever you pick for level 20, it's not a big deal. Level 20 is not like something that players often get to or really get to even do all too much in. Regardless, I included my pick. Your pick can do whatever. And yeah, so that's essentially the build up until this point. I guess I do have to recommend that you pick up the Animate Dead spell. So for spell recommendations, you need it for this build. So yes, duh, you must select Animate Dead. And beyond that, I mean, I don't really recommend equipment for spellcasters, mostly because I don't feel like there's really good equipment for spellcasters overall. I mean, if you get a good staff of Necromancer that works really well for your build, I think that would work really solid. But there's no items I feel like are necessary or easy to access for a character for these builds, obviously. And the Necromancer least of all, because they don't even really utilize their stats unless they're casting spells in tandem with their undead summons doing their thing. So, you know, I guess I'll mention the archetypes. If you're using the free archetype bonus roll, which I recommend most tables use, it just gives your tables a lot of more ability to do what they need to. Obviously, picking up whatever feats from Reanimator or Undead Master that you like is really good, but feats for outside of this, I actually recommend Ritualists, because if you pick up Ritualist, especially at a later level, or I think you can, at level 8, even if you pick up Ritualist really early, at level 8, you can pick the Create Undead ritual and create Undead the ritual. You use gold and you create essentially a permanent undead. Though I do believe you need some kind of spells to wrangle them. I don't think they're automatically in your control. Yes, so if you get a success on the check, if it's an intelligent undead, it does not become your minion, but if it is a non-intelligent undead, it does, or if it is a mindless undead, it can become your minion if you choose, and if you crit success, it'll become your minion whether it's intelligent or not. If you fail, you don't create an undead, and if you crit fail, the soul is angry at you, and the undead attempts to destroy you when you make it. So, yeah. I mean, it's a really good ritual. It's good if you have the gold income to sustain building an army. This can be a bit of a headache for your GM, and if you don't have a good way of storing your undead, obviously this particular archetype can become a little encumbersome. The whole build design I made was to be as unencumbersome as possible, and so that you have undead at your fingertips whenever you need it. Create Undead is just really good if you have a good campaign for Create Undead. Beyond Ritualist, which Ritualist, obviously has its own benefits as well the more you get into it, to the point where you can just make Undead without aid from an ally, which is really solid. And I think you can make him cheaper, too. Anyway, the next one I'm going to recommend is Lich. Because if you're going to be the Undead Master, you might as well be a Lich. Literally, that's the only reason I have. Lich is a solid archetype in general, but I only picked it because it just fit the build too perfectly not to. Last but not least, I actually recommend Shadowcaster. It's a very interesting archetype, and the thing about Undead is most Undead have dark vision, an imprecise sense, or life sense, meaning that even in greater darkness, most of your Undead will be barely hampered by the darkness, and Shadowcaster gives you a lot of ability to manipulate those kind of situations. The ability to create darkness, to do a wide variety of different kinds of focus spells and the like. It also gives you more focus points that you can utilize for your augment summons if you really need to, or vice versa. And honestly, I thought it was a very interesting build. Being able to manipulate darkness with Undead works a lot better than you would think. And when enemies are flat-footed, they're a lot easier for your Undead to hit, making them a little bit closer to the Undead's level, especially if they're augmented up. For my Ancestry picks, Dhampir actually was a lot more fitting than I thought. Again, there's that shadow aspect if you use the darkness spell. You have a really good chance of just being able to see through the darkness if you pick a Dhampir from a Ancestry that has low light. You can pick up a feat that gives you dark vision. They also have a lot of good skills for stealthing. They have vampire lore, which is actually surprisingly very handy when your whole thing is creating and commanding the undead. And yeah, it surprisingly worked really, really well, in my opinion. And because you have negative healing, you can benefit from spells like the harm spell for healing purposes, along with your undead minions. I think this is overall a really good pick. The other one was Fetchling, and Fetchling for a lot of the same reasons of You get dark vision when you select Fetchling right away, so you can use the darkness spell. You can get some extra magic from the Fetchling feats as well. I think you can get access to darkness through one of their feats. And being a Fetchling Damfire, I mean, you just get everything in one. There's very interesting. I think both of those work very well. Obviously, there's also the various undead ancestries as well. I didn't select those because they're both rare and they might not be copacetic with your GM's campaign, while something like a Dhampir and a Fetchling can be used in more campaigns without too much headache or concern. So yeah, I mean, well, I guess beyond the fact that your character isn't a necromancer, which is already an issue, but you know, I mean, the whole point of the build is that you're a necromancer, so you know. Regardless, this is the build. This is my version of a necromancer. If you have a better idea for a necromancy build, please put it down in the comments below. I'd love to see the builds. I also want to shout out here. Let me pull up their name. I want to shout out someone in my Discord. It's super funny. Nagatsune. I wrote my script for the True Necromancer right when you started talking about your various necromancy builds for the community spotlight, and just in general. Actually, you just brought it up out of the blue right after I wrote my script, which was kind of funny. So you know, I didn't look at your builds because I wanted to make sure that this video was completely my own and, you know, not stealing from anything you put. We might have just had some coincidences along the way. I mean, Reanimator's kind of an obvious choice, obviously. But yeah, so it's just kind of funny. And a lot of people are talking about necromancy, especially after Book of the Dead. So I hope you all enjoyed the video. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and end it before we go on too much longer. Thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me. And I'll see you all next time. Bye.